Greetings, travelers. I'm your host, the C.the Knows a Lot, Dr. Waluigi. Well, it's December, and you know what that means. That's right, it's time to continue our adventures with the inhabitants of the Evergreen Forest. However, I will admit that I don't remember much of Season 2, and after rewatching it, I'm not surprised. But who knows, maybe this season will have a few surprises for the rest of you. I hope.
When darkness falls, leaving.
The first episode focuses on Cedric and Bert trying to get a spot on a baseball team called the Mammoth Mudhens, which leads to them arguing and trying to show off who's the better candidate. This episode is just a generic being a team player episode that many of us have seen a million times already in other cartoons. The only noteworthy things I can mention is that the music is now done by Lisa Lougheed instead of Luba, and we got another cast change with Melissa, who is now voiced by Susan Roman instead of Linda Feig. But other than those major changes, this episode has nothing of note to mention. Except for some reason, this season has new weird intros of Bert explaining the premise of each episode. It doesn't add anything to the season and honestly feels really out of place, especially since the regular narrator still introduces the episodes.
When darkness falls, leaving.
In this episode, Cyril is cooking up a scheme to sell a terrible cologne and wants to have Bert as his spokesperson after he sees a performance he did with the others, which leads into wacky shenanigans that are kind of entertaining, but leads into another episode of Bert letting his ego get the better of him, hurting his friends. I really don't have that much to say about this episode because it's just another Bert's a Jerk episode that has you waiting impatiently for it to end. I will say that the opening song of the episode with Bert and the gang is well done, but that's the only positive I can give for this episode.
When darkness falls, leaving.
This is one of 3 episodes I remember watching as a kid from this season. Cyril receives a letter from his old business partner Carl Snarl, who he ran out on when their business was failing, and is coming back to give Cyril his just desserts. Of the 3 episodes I remember as a kid, this one is probably my second favorite of the season, as it has a lot of funny freakout moments with Cyril, which ends with the funniest twist ending the show has had thus far. Good episode, even if so far that's not saying much.
When darkness falls, leaving.
This is one of the better episodes this season, and it's one that I barely remembered as a kid. This episode is split into following Cyril wanting to build a dam after he gets a massive electric bill from Mammoth after the pigs use too much of their appliances. Meanwhile, Ralph and Melissa go on a camping trip while Bert and Cedric hang out with Ralph's Aunt Gertie. This episode goes back to what I liked about Season 1, with a focus on adventure and some comedy. Most of the comedy comes from the new character of Aunt Gertie, who is a fun-loving adventurer that shows that she can outdo both Bert and Cedric when they go on a hike, and even helps Ralph and Melissa after Cyril's dam causes the Evergreen Forest to flood. A fun episode with some good tension-filled moments.
When darkness falls, leaving.
And now we have the episode that introduces us to my least favorite character in the show. Bert is getting ready to compete in the first Evergreen Games along with Cyril after the pigs convince him that he's young after they give him a fake potion from the Fountain of Youth. At the same time, Ralph and Melissa's nephew, though they call him their cousin in this episode, Bentley, comes over from the city for a visit. One of the things I liked as the seasons went on was that they tried to give the pigs more to do, including giving them more personalities outside of the dumb lackey trope that a lot of kids shows were doing at the time. But the main thing I don't like about this episode is the introduction of Bentley. I will say that in this episode, he's not too bad, but in later episodes, he would be written as this stuck-up, know-it-all brat that gets under your skin the more he's on screen. Other than that, there's nothing really special about this episode. It has some good comedic elements with Cyril and Bert, and this episode does include my second favorite song by Lisa Lougheed, but it doesn't really stand out that much.
When darkness falls, leaving.
In this episode, we follow Bert and Melissa as they discover a cave with many paintings in it. Melissa decides to call her friend, Professor Smedley Smythe, to investigate the paintings. Unfortunately, Cyril soon discovers the money-making potential of the art world and uses the cave paintings as a tourist trap. This is another episode that is only important because it introduced new reoccurring characters, that being Professor Smedley Smith and Lady Baden-Baden, the latter of which will be important later in the season. But yeah, this episode is boring with a very stupid and obvious twist that even a blind person could see. Though I'll give it this, Cyril Sneer does look good in a suit.
darkness falls, leaving.
Oh wow, this is just wow. This episode has Cyril trying to get over a cold, and the pigs end up mishearing his doctor into thinking he's dying. Once this reaches the news of the Raccoons, Bert decides to raise money to erect a statue in Cyril's honor. However, Cyril learns that he isn't dying and decides to use this opportunity to bank up the Raccoons and still get a statue out of it. Do I even need to say anything about this? It's just a stupid liar revealed episode that focuses on the biggest liar in the show. So how can Bert and the others fall for this crap? This feels like the writers left the room and the interns came in and wrote this and released it while no one was looking. I hope that whoever wrote this episode got punished for it.
When darkness falls, leaving.
This is the second episode I saw the most as a kid, and it's probably the best out of the three. Cedric and Bert go exploring in Beaver Bite's swamp. There they meet Herman, a hermit that lives in the swamp, who tells them about the swamp and that it may have oil underneath it. Cedric tells Cyril about this, and he decides to try to buy the swamp to drain it of its oil. As I said before, this was the second of the three episodes I remember watching as a kid, and I remember loving this episode for the character of Herman. He's a good guy that just wants to live a peaceful life until it's almost ruined by Cyril's antics, but he doesn't sit by and lets this happen. Which led to the message of the episode about the importance of needing help when Herman can't read and needs Cedric and Bert's help to find the deed to the swamp. One of my top favorites from this season, and the show in general.
When darkness falls, leaving.
So this episode could have been an interesting look into the life of Cyril Sneer, but was instead kind of wasted. Due to a mix-up by the pigs, Lady Baden-Baden receives a letter from Cyril believing that he wants to marry her, which leads to wacky shenanigans, including a competition between Mr. Knox as he confesses his love to Lady Baden-Baden. I will admit, I do like this episode because it does have some funny moments and a sweet ending with Lady Baden-Baden choosing Mr. Knox as her boyfriend. But the one thing I wish they explored more in this episode, or in this series, was Cyril's wife. This is another episode that expands upon the relationship between Cedric and Cyril, and shows Cyril regretting that Cedric never had a mother figure in his life. So, when he does learn about the mistake, he does consider that it might be a good thing as Cedric would have that mother figure in his life. I would have liked to see this episode have another flashback to Cyril meeting his wife, them dating, or even showing Cedric's birth. But the only thing we get out of this episode is Cyril mentioning to Cedric that he fell in love with his mom because she made a lot of money for him, and that's it. Which is a shame because they did this in another episode, which I'll talk about when it comes up.
When darkness falls, leaving.
Well, here it is, the last episode I remember watching as a kid, and it's a collection of my 3 least favorite tropes. Cyril discovers that the pigs have built a time machine which he uses with one of the pigs to go back in time and fixes certain points in his life, aka is an excuse to show off clips from other episodes, which leads to a lazy "it was all a dream" ending. This entire episode is filled with the 3 laziest tropes you can find in shows like this. A boring time travel plot that leads to a bunch of clips from other episodes, ending with a "it was all a dream" ending that feels like a cop-out. Which sums up my feelings about this season as lazy, uninteresting, and makes me want to go back and watch the first season along with the specials.
When darkness falls, leaving.
So now it's time to pick the best and worst episode of the season, which was not that hard to choose. For my choice of the best episode of the season, I have to give it to episode 8, Read No Evil. It's just a nice episode with a good message that has some great character moments with Cedric, Bert, and Herman. I wouldn't call this the best episode of the show, nor would I put this episode in my top 10 favorites. But it does put a smile on my face whenever I watch it, and I can say it's at least one of the only memorable episodes of the season.
When darkness falls, leaving.
Oh, there's no contest in which episode is the worst of the season. Our winner is episode 10, Time Trap. Not only does this episode have a terrible plot, but it commits the sin of having 3 of the laziest tropes a writer can use to put off the fact that they had no idea how to end this season. Seriously, not only do we get an episode filled with clips, but we get time travel and "it was all a dream" cliches in one episode. And that is an achievement I've only ever seen done once in my life.
When darkness falls, leaving.
I'm not gonna lie, guys, this has so far been the worst season of the show. I would even call this worse than Let's Dance. Sure, that special is just a 20-minute music video, but at least the characters were interesting and the music was great. Although, to be fair, this season did give us the amazing songs by Lisa Loeid. But this season is just filled with episodes where Bert is a dick and Cyril is a dumbass. Not really something I look forward to in one of my favorite shows. I give this season a 3 out of 10, and that's only because there's a total of 3 episodes I like from this season. Thanks for watching, I'm Dr. Waluigi, and remember, don't judge a book by its cover, cause you'll never know what's inside. Good night, everyone.